Hello everybody, my name is Dean Cross. I'm a Worimi man. My grandfather's from Bulahdelah, but I grew up in Ngunnawal-Ngambri country, sort of northeast of Canberra. So my background was in contemporary dance. I was a contemporary dancer and choreographer for a long time. So physicality is a big part of my work. The body still appears in my work, sometimes in its absence, like in this work. So it began with a conversation about 18 months ago. And I proposed this wild idea that I had where I wanted to rebuild Cooks Cottage in a one-to-one scale and sort of burn it to the ground. It's sort of Cooks Cottage is in Melbourne, and in the 30s, a private millionaire bought the house at auction and shipped it brick by brick to Melbourne, and then rebuilt it in a park in Melbourne, and there it stands. And it became and still is a really potent kind of symbol for many inequalities that exist in our kind of post-colonial or colonial kind of construct that we live in here. So I wanted to take it on. I mean, Cook has appeared in a theme a lot in art in Australia, but I wanted to sort of take it on in a meaningful way by destroying it. I think that it was lots of things. I'm reluctant to kind of reduce it down to one thing, but I see actually, especially in Aboriginal culture, fire is about growth more than anything else. It's not actually about destruction. But then at the same time, it was also about this kind of performative, juvenile sort of gesture, of how ridiculous and how pointless, because even if you burn down the actual cottage, it's not going to change anything. And that's the real issue, And so that was sort of part of the thinking, that it has these kind of parallels or can exist within these kind of parallel lanes of meaning, depending on context and depending on how you access the work. I went through a process with a Noongar architect he and I visited Cooks Cottage, and he sort of retro designed the building and then delivered me a set of architectural drawings. And so one of the things that I wanted to kind of connect to at the same time as he and I were doing that was also the time when the Djab Wurrung trees were being sort of talked a lot about in the media and are still being protested today. And so I wanted to kind of parallel, or at least have a conversation about where our values lie, where our political values lie, where our social and cultural values lie. And it became so obvious that a cottage, Cooks Cottage, which was never actually even Cooks Cottage, can be valued and can be protected by law, yet the same sort of thing, or an equivalent, these birthing trees, a really important cultural site, still has no kind of broader value to the Australian public, has no value to the Australian politicians. And only last week, Suzanne Ley kind of officially sort of said they're going to cut them down. They're definitely not going to give them heritage status. And so what's ended up in the gallery, I kind of see it actually as this portrait of Suzanne Ley, or it's kind of a portrait of an ideology, a political ideology that she embodies. And the kind of dichotomy where you have one object, one building, which never actually was what they say it was, which is Cooks Cottage. It's a complete fabrication. It's just like Disneyland. Then you have an equivalent object, these trees, these birthing trees, which have been important to the people that own them, the traditional owners. For 800 years, those trees have been there, and it's completely obscene. Yet here we are. That's the world we live in, and actually that's the standard. And as Aboriginal people, you scream till you're black and blue, but you just have to kind of also learn to deal with it, because nothing's going to change. And so, those trees will get cut down, no doubt about it, but Cooks Cottage will stand there forever. And is it right? Definitely not. And so the work now that's in the space, as I say, is a kind of, I consider it to be almost a portrait of Suzanne Ley, and a sort of, at least a way to kind of to trigger the thoughts that are part of that process in thinking and how we place value. Because I think, if we can learn to shift that value, or if non-Aboriginal people can learn to shift where they place that value, then things will be very different.